So what type of relationship should the UK now be establishing? Well, to discuss Britain and Europe's future in the short and longer term, I'm joined by Lord Digby Jones, who's held some of the highest positions in British business. He was Director General of the Employers Federation, the CBI, for 6 years, and then UK Trade and Investment Minister in 2007 to 2008. He described himself as a reluctant Brexiteer. Frances O'Grady, who's been an active trade unionist and campaigner all of her working life, she was appointed General Secretary of the British Trades Union Congress, the TUC, in 2013. The first woman ever to hold the post. She was firmly in the Remain camp. And Artur Fischer, as Director of the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, he helped make the DAX index of top German companies a household name. He's now dividing his time between London and Berlin in his current job, which is Chief Executive of the Berlin Stock Exchange. And he would have liked the UK to remain in the EU. Welcome to you all. Digby, let me just start with you. As you say, a reluctant Brexiteer. Yeah. You are, of course, very much somebody who's acquainted with UK business. What was it about what the EU represented to the UK that you were uncomfortable with?
This is Asia's century. This is about a globalised world. And the EU was marching valiantly towards 1970. It was looking inwards. It was an amalgam of unaccountable, unelected people in Brussels with the vested interest of big business, the vested interest of trade unions. To me, and I've been on the inside, you know, I've sat there at these meetings, I would have loved to have voted to stay in a reformed EU. That's where I was, and it's very publicly known. I had no confidence that, and I still don't, by the way, that the European Union will reform sufficiently to give 520 million people living in peace the healthcare, the pensions and the welfare they're going to need in Asia's century in 50 years' time. And the only way to look after our grandchildren in that world is to generate sufficient wealth to do so. And I have to say, the way it's set up, the way it conducts its business, there wasn't a prayer it will ever reform, and that's why I did it. OK, Frances, let's come to you. During the time that Britain has been a member of the EU, as Digby said, it has the power to impose regulations on British workers. Have they been broadly beneficial in your view?
Well, we very often hear them described as red tape, but of course the EU has provided a guarantee for rights that are crucial to working people, either new rights or stronger rights on everything from having the right to be consulted on redundancies to equal rights for part-time workers and agency workers. But the EU is also critical for working people in terms of jobs. It's about cheap trade, it's about being the destination for nearly half of our exports, and that means jobs. And there are a lot of people very worried today about what the future holds.
Art, let's come to you. Germany sees the UK obviously as a very crucial trading partner and counterbalance really within the EU, because it finds commonality in terms of economic policy with the EU more than it might do with France.
True, and it was a very sad day for us in Germany to see that Great Britain is going to leave us. And I also have to say that sad not just because of an economy point of view, but also because of Europe as a whole. Great Britain made a lot of important contributions, and it will be difficult to go ahead without that. So looking at the argument we heard earlier, I think it is also noticeable, at least when I just listened to you, that it was quite a self-centered, almost egoistic kind of statement, because we do know that Great Britain is very good, but we also have to take care in Europe of the weak ones, of the countries which are not where we are. And the reason why we do that is very selfish again, because we want to avoid going back to 1930, whatever. We want to make sure that we work together and not against each other.
But Digby, is this what you are saying, that in fact you want the UK really unshackled from Europe and its peculiarities?
Not in the slightest. And frankly, if you're going to start bringing people up in southern Europe that they believe in an economy that exports olives and imports BMWs, that makes Germany richer and them poorer, that is not egotistical in any way, shape or form for Britain. It might be for Germany, but it's not for Britain. And one of the formative moments I had actually in this whole issue was when I was trade minister, and I can remember sitting in Brussels and saying, why are we putting no tariffs on agricultural produce coming in from Africa raw, but we put tariffs, if we give them the value added to refine sugar, for instance, in Africa, and then cocoa's another one, and bring it in as refined, so the value added stays in the developing nation. Why is it you tariff that? I'll tell you why: to protect your markets and make your money in Europe. And if you really want trade to be a really good, beneficial thing in the world, the rich nations, such as us, such as Germany, and very much France, who are very protectionist, you should stop using Brussels to protect your markets and condemning Africa to taking our development aid check and buying their raw materials, and instead let them educate them, skill them, give them the ability to create wealth. That's how business can be a force for good. And all I got in return was, I'm not having farmers demonstrating in the Champs-Elysees say the answer's no. And I thought to myself, do you know, this is an egotistical, selfish argument from the forming members of the EU, not from Britain, my friend.
Francis, do you see the EU, had it become too introspective?
Look, the TUC and trade unions across Europe don't believe that the EU is perfect, but I think
But in what way was it not perfect?
At its heart, there are some important values here. I think we have to learn in this world that we all depend on each other, that if one country is doing well and another country is doing poorly, then that's actually a problem for all of us, and that we share an interest in making sure that the wealth that we all create is shared fairly. My concern is that we are going to see workers losing out in terms of their wages, their rights, their jobs. And our top priority, the decision has been taken, our top priority is that working people mustn't pay the price for Brexit.
And I completely agree with that. That actually, my vision is to have Britain engaging fully with our friends in Europe in a commonality of creating wealth and actually doing it off the back of skilled people. And look at the automotive industry in Britain. It's fully unionised. And it's very, very successful because they work, the unions and the manufacturers work in harmony and in partnership, and they get the skill up.
Right, but Art, to come to you, do you accept that Europe has become, perhaps has gone down a protectionist path, or it has gone down a path really as Germany being a dominant economy and every other economy having a dependence upon it?
Germany is, I don't want to say unfortunately, but it is the biggest member state in Europe. We can't change that, and we need to stand up to that responsibility.
What do you mean you can't change that? That asymmetry is part of the political project of Europe?
We are successful in our business. We are a big country, and we work very well with unions, by the way. We make them part of our supervisory board, which is a big step forward. So we now need to deal with that responsibility. I think Germany should be part of the EU or not isolated. And that's why I'm sad that with Great Britain starting this process, there is certainly the danger that others might look at this again. And that, again, will cause the negotiation to be very, very hard, because we need to make sure that nobody gets an appetite.
Oh, you mean punishment?
No punishment. No, self-protection. Self-protection.
Is it different?
But this sounds like it playing into the concern that you had, that it had its own momentum, the EU. It was a political project, and that really it had ceased to add value to the people who it was supposed to serve.
Absolutely right.
Right. So why was it not possible to reform it from within?
Because the vested interest did not want to reform. A good example of the Common Agricultural Policy. 75% of the taxation spend in Europe, the donations in and the money out, goes on agriculture. Now, take a 21-year-old kid in Greece or Spain today, probably unemployed, if not, taking a big bung from Brussels to work in a subsidised industry called agriculture. Why don't you keep the money down in southern Europe to skill these people up, so that they're attractive to Northern Europe because they have a skill, they're attractive to the rest of the world in Asia Century because they have a skill, or, the best of all, they stay at home with a skill and attract inward investment and create wealth.
But you're discussing the wrong level. What we should let me just make that point. The level you should discuss is how comes that the British politicians and diplomats, which are the finest in the world, didn't manage to get allies and didn't manage to get their point across. That is a problem, because the UK has not sent their best people into the EU. The UK has not tried to change the EU hard enough. We would have welcomed more support in many of your points. We don't like some of the things that happen either.
No,
OK, Francis, I want to come to you, if I may. Is it true, is what Digby is saying is true, that we are, in fact, subsidising industries that really don't promote our best interests in terms of skills?
As a Europe.
out of Europe?
Yeah.
Well, I think it depends very much on the industry. Automotive has a great record of success in investing in apprentices and adult skills too. We know that there's a long, dirty tail of small businesses who are not investing for the future, and the trade union movement across Europe has always argued that skills is a real priority for us. But I think what's clear is that young people in Britain voted to remain. The decision is clear. There's no going back on that decision. But I think we owe it to young people who are deeply worried about their future, their rights to seek jobs, not just people coming to Britain, but people going from Britain to other countries, their hopes for the future of ever getting a home or a decent job, let alone a good wage. And we owe it to them to make sure that the priority now is, across Europe, I would hope, is that that generation who are disaffected, who feel they haven't got a future, we start looking at inequality in Europe. It can't go on.
You're watching Talking Business with me, Tanya Beckett, in London, where we're discussing life after Brexit. What will Britain's decision to leave the European Union club mean for the economy, businesses, and what sort of relationship will we now have with Europe in the future? Francis, let's start on this issue of EU funding. The UK has been a net contributor to the EU, but in fact there is also funding which supports industries, science being one of them. How great a loss do you see that, if and when that goes?
Well, again, we're hearing from businesses and local authorities that they want guarantees from the UK government that that money for everything from science parks to railway stations won't be lost.
Art, of course, you work in the finance industry. How does it change the dynamics if London is outside the EU? Just briefly, it's a big question, I know.
But the short answer is dramatically. We have our liquidity providers who come from the US. They are situated in London and they trade on our platform across to retail customers in France, Italy, Belgium, Germany. That can only happen because of the European passport. As a German regulated exchange, we are present in all those countries without any extra red tape. We got our regulation, our approval in Germany, and we can sell everywhere. And that will stop. And that will mean, on one hand, that maybe the liquidity providers have to move into Europe because they don't have the passport anymore, or have to take extra efforts to admit them to my exchange, and then they will be regulated by a European regulator.
I would actually say to Artur, you're wrong, because I can't see why the European passport in financial services can't continue, and I can't see why those elements of the free trade aspect of the single market can't continue, because it's in everybody's interest. There has to be a model that says we trade for the benefit of everybody, and there is a limit on free movement of labour. That's never been done. It goes against one of the founding principles. What's wrong with that? That's what I would say.
What is creating a new EU? Francis, so we just come to Francis.
I think we need to, all of us, work together at a national level, business, unions, government. I think we need to roll up our sleeves. But what is clear is that there wasn't a plan as to what would happen if the Brexit vote was won.
Well, it's difficult before you start negotiations. So what would your vision be?
Well, let's be clear that as soon as Article 50 is triggered, then the UK's power drains by each month that negotiation goes on.
There is a time. There is a time frame, is what you're saying.
So does
there is
the
what
EU.
vision? As you've pointed out, as we've all pointed out, the democratic decision within the UK was to leave. So what vision would you have?
The TUC's preference, if we are stuck with this decision, which of course we respect, is that we go for the Norway model. But as we said throughout the campaign, that means you can't have your cake and eat it.
Well,
You've got to have. If you want access to the single market, you have to have free movement.
But you don't have to have free
and you have to have rights for working
I'm
people
just going to come and
to stop unfair competition.
I'm going to ask Art that question. Why is it that it is so central to the idea of free trade that you must also have free movement of workers?
We have to make sure, when I say we, all in the EU, we have to make sure that we are competing on a level playing field. And the level playing field determines, for example, that there can't be, let's say, child labour in the UK. That wouldn't be allowed, or that certain working hours would be in a certain framework. Creating those kind of agreements makes it actually possible to compete across us without any extra barriers. Now, free movement, if I may, let me, sorry, but free movement is so important for the EU because we have countries which do not have the kind of industry where their population can work. We need to provide them with an income.
But
we need to make sure, on the other hand, that sophisticated countries like the UK get skilled workforces in.
Sure, but the world has changed, and the business plan of Europe has not changed with it.
Digby, I'd like to ask you about going forward what sort of trade relationships we might set up outside the EU as well. We have in Britain a very special relationship with the US, and you've hinted at very fast growth, of course, in India and also in China. So how is it going to be easier outside the EU?
What I would like to do, and I'd make an appeal right now, I don't want the civil service to be doing all this, because I haven't done it for 43 years. I would like some overseas help. New Zealand were left in the lurch by us in '73 and honed their skills in this. They've offered help, take it. I'd like the unions, I'd like business, I'd like some skilled negotiators from professional services. I'd like people like me who've done it before, bring them in, and basically this is our country. And we should pull together and have working parties to do the one with America, working parties to do the one with China, one with India, and obviously one with the EU. Try and use the power of trade to get a good working relationship with developing countries so we actually help them.
Do you think this is an opportunity to offer, as Art describes, a more level playing field?
I really hope so. I hope that it's a wake-up call. And at a very practical level, if we do take that Team UK approach to getting new trade deals, then there has to be something at the heart of it that is for working people. It has to be about jobs, good jobs, not any old jobs.
I absolutely agree.
Skills and
they see why it can
workers'
bring it up.
rights. And if we can do that, I think we'd avoid perhaps some of the problems we've had over the TTIP deal, that transatlantic partnership,
where there has been widespread concern about loss of industry and jobs.
And privatisation. So we need to be very clear from the start that if we build that kind of consensus, we can avoid some of the mistakes that we've made.
Totally agree.
Artur, but let me come to you. Do you see from outside the UK that actually this is a concern about globalisation, or do you see it as a more specific UK concern about its position within the EU?
Excellent point you make, because what we are experiencing here, the symptoms the British citizens have experienced, are not just EU symptoms, they are globalisation symptoms. We have the unique situation where the work which can be done somewhere doesn't need to be done by the people who are at the same place. It can be done anywhere. And we have another challenge coming up, the automation. So the challenges are huge. And again, I believe in the EU we can manage them much better together, working out a compromise, than fighting each other. Because what you want, sorry, being blunt,
I know what you mean.
but you want to get the best deal for yourself. I don't want to negotiate with someone who just wants to get the best deal. I want to find a compromise which is good for both sides.
I actually want to see a bit of enlightened self-interest here, which is the best deal for a poor, hard-working person in North England. And if that lifts the living standards of someone in the south of Greece, I'm thrilled to bits. What I don't see at the moment is either of those two things are being satisfied by Brussels.
Do we have time? Because inevitably, and I'm sure you would accept this, in the interim there is uncertainty.
Oh, definitely.
How
and
quickly,
damaging uncertainty.
Yes, quite so. So how quickly can trade pacts, trade agreements be pulled off in your experience?
Well, it depends on what both parties want out of it.
Yes.
And we've never been here before, any of us. If there's a will from us, and if we got it together, I tell you now, these countries would want to do the deal because we are so engaged with them.
Francis, a brief thought?
Well, you could do a deal tomorrow if you're prepared to sell your granny, but that's not the kind of deal that we want.
You don't know my granny.
I was about to say that, but I thought it was disingenuous.
But
we can imagine.
we need to get good deals, but we need to be honest. The economy is already potentially facing damage as a result of the delay. It would be an absolute mistake now to cut jobs and services in the public sphere. What the priority must be is public investment in infrastructure, house building, to keep that demand going through this very difficult period.
I agree with that.
Do you think that Germany will come round to seeing perhaps a bigger picture here?
The bigger picture for Germany will be that we invested and we need the EU, even though the Great Britain is not part of that anymore. So we will do anything to protect the EU. We want to make sure that this step now does not damage our internal relationship. And in order to do that, there will be a price someone has to pay who is outside and not inside. And that has nothing to do with being nasty or whatever. It is self-defense.
Just punishment.
No punishment at all.
reality.
We want to make sure that Europe, as we build it together with you, will continue to exist. And for that reason, it will be very difficult to find special deals. But as you said, you have other opportunities. You have China, you have India, and there might be things you can do which you couldn't do before. We will be watching, we will be observing and learning. And let's see how the situation develops.
Well, thank you very much to all of you. Lord Digby Jones, Francis O'Grady and Artur Fischer.